Welcome to Cornell Keynotes. I'm your host, Keith Cowing, visiting lecturer at Cornell Tech and an executive coach for CEOs and senior leaders. And here with me today is Dan Van Tran, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Collectors Holdings, which is the world's leading authenticator and grader of collectibles. Dan, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Great to be back again.
Awesome. Great to have you here. And you work in an environment that has a variety of human skills and physical labor and warehouses and also technology and AI. You're also an angel investor and an advisor to startups. So you see businesses day to day at the C-suite level that are doing billions in revenue. And also you see tiny organizations that are starting from scratch. So I really look forward to the conversation and talking about how AI is shifting everything from small companies to big companies. And most importantly, what we can learn from that to develop the skills and the teams that we need to move forward. So let me set the stage a little bit, and then we'll jump in terms of why this is such an important shift for people to really be aware of. The world is transforming. And if you think about a few select innovations over the past 200 years that have completely changed societal dynamics and economics and the skills that we need, if you look back to the steam-powered locomotive that came out in the 1800s, and then the invention of the tractor in 1892, it shifted the US and the world completely, where in this country, 40% of jobs were in farming in the late 1800s, and now it's 1%. We have far more jobs, but everything shifted. And so this led to industrialization. It led to people moving to urban environments and cities and fueled the industrial revolution. It also led to the need for new skills that hadn't existed before. Capital formation and investing in technology and maintaining the technology meant getting bigger and managing money and managing at scale. So as industrial revolution hit, and factory jobs became a major part of the economy, you ended up with the first MBA program in 1908 so that you could learn how to manage at scale. You had the high school movement in the 30s and the 40s, where it wasn't the fact that everybody had access to free public high school level education before that. And this was really a rollout of we need new skills, we need new education in the country. And then the GI Bill, where people returning from World War II could get free college education, was a major aspect of that as well. And then you had a couple innovations that completely changed that, where in 1947, the transistor was invented. Shout out to New Jersey, where I live. It's one of our claims to fame, where the transistor was invented here at Bell Labs. And then in 1975, the programmable logic controller. And between the two of those, now you could automate and control factory work and machines in a way that wasn't possible before. And from there until now, factory jobs just dropped tremendously, where it was more than half of the jobs in the country, and now it's single-digit percentage. And along with all of this came the rise to knowledge work. So the knowledge work economy in the US is by far the majority of the jobs at this point, which is defined as people that are not mowing lawns or cutting hair or building houses, but communicating, writing documents, managing meetings, moving around ones and zeros. And as a part of that, we've had four major shifts, which was the PC revolution, the internet in 1990, cloud, which really kicked off in earnest in 2006, the iPhone in 2007. There'd been mobile devices before that, but that was really a seminal moment that changed everything. And then in 2012 was the age of what we're on the brink of now, which is AI. So there were some really big deep learning breakthroughs, which led to OpenAI forming in 2015, the famous paper that was written at Google in 2017 called Attention is All You Need. And this defined the transformer architecture. And that white paper published by Google turned into what GPT is today and what all of the generative AI platforms are based on. And then obviously at 2022 with ChatGPT. And so if you just look at these curves, we are on the brink of a complete shift in how we think about the value and the economy of the skills and what we bring to the table. And I think it's really important for people to put that in context. So when we talk about AI, it's not just another iOS app or another feature, another device. It's a shift in how we have to think about our skills and how we build those skills. And if you turn that on the knowledge work, in the past, it's been we brought our knowledge, our tasks, you're asked to do something and you do it, our judgment, our leadership, and our creativity to the table. But a lot of the work we did was based on our knowledge and our day-to-day tasks. And going forward, there's a total shift here where the value that we bring as knowledge workers is really going to be about our judgment and our leadership and our creativity. And if we're not bringing those to the table, then, what is it that we're doing here? And so I think it's both a big shift, but also really interesting and really exciting if we approach it in the right way. And so that's what we're going to jump into today on the show. And so with that as a transition and just setting the stage, Dan, I would love to just get a little bit of an intro to collectors, if you could share with the audience what it is at a more detailed level that you do, and then we can get into some of these skills that people are developing and show a few examples for people of there's 100x improvements out there in the world today, which is just unbelievable. And we'll cue it up that way. So tell us a little bit about collectors.
Sure. So I'll try to keep it short. A lot of times my intro takes 20 minutes because there was a lot of change that's happened in the company. But Collectors is as mentioned, leading authenticator and grader of collectibles in the world. We deal with trading cards, coins, video games, other memorabilia. In 2021, the company, which was founded in 1986, was a public company that was then brought from public to private because they hit a ceiling in terms of their success. And they were hitting limitations in terms of how many collectibles they could process. But the demands of the pandemic world were very high. A lot of people got into collectibles, started sending a lot of things to us, and so they needed a way to rebuild. And that's when I came in as the chief technology officer to try to reimagine a world that was more tech-centric within the collectible space, both internally and externally. And so from there, the company was acquired for $850 million a year later with some changes in technology, processes, the help of a lot of other executives. We brought the valuation up to $4.3 billion. And that was due to a lot of change, and not yet AI, but building the foundation for AI. And so it actually taught me a lot about what was needed in order to not just rebuild the legacy technology, but actually set it up so that you could lay it up to then transition to these new AI solutions and really enter this new AI world.
So one area of that I'd love to dig into, you talk about this transformation, you talk about the foundation, you talk about the skills. So let's start with you, for example, with your skill sets. I have a hypothesis that we're entering an era of multi-specialists, where in the 90s, if you think about technology development, it was an era of generalists where there were 6 engineers, 10 engineers on a team. There was a manager who barely had a title. They were just the boss, and everybody did everything. And you just built stuff. And then we got into an era of hyper specialization where you had a front end engineer and a back end engineer. And this is with the technology lens, but I think a lot of different industries had that. You had a designer, a product manager, a user researcher, and all these people would work together. And we're so specialized. There are a lot of people at the table doing a lot of different things. And now what I see is multi-specialists where people are bringing multiple skills to the table. It used to not matter if you had multiple skills because unless you were the founder or the CEO, you didn't have time to do 2 jobs. And so it wasn't relevant. Now it is because people are doing not quite 2, but I see 1.5 a lot. They're doing 1.5 jobs. I think it's embarking on 2. And my belief is if you could do 2 jobs, you're 3 times as valuable because for one, you're doing 2 jobs and then you get another X on your 3X because there's one less person to negotiate with and you move faster. And in this world of change, velocity wins. And so taking that as a lens of if you have a 1-2 punch with 2 skill sets, maybe we can get personal for a second and share with the audience. What do you think your 1-2 punch is? And what are the skill sets that you're personally working on to be able to develop as you look forward and think about an AI future? What's important to you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely a world of change happening. AI is equalizing everyone's skill sets across a lot of different areas, bringing everyone up essentially to almost entry level for every single role that's out there. And so for me personally, I initially, when I came out of school, I was a comp sci major. I was actually dual comp sci, electronic media arts and communication. So maybe I restarted my duality of multiple skill sets then in college. But I came out and I was a mediocre engineer at best, slightly above average. And so I decided I needed to be a lot better at what was predominantly the primary part of engineering back then in the early and mid 2000s, which was back-end engineering. I wanted to learn how to build systems and design a lot of fundamental infrastructure. And so I surrounded myself with a lot of smart people to do that. And then front-end engineering came along, as you mentioned, all these new front-end toolkits, but they required a different sort of thinking and way of working. And so I started to adapt to that. By the time I joined Flatiron, the second company I worked at, and it was actually a startup filled with a lot of people who were polyglots. They actually knew a lot of and had a lot of different skills and came from a lot of different organizations where they combined those skills. And it was just amazing to me to see an organization full of these sorts of diverse people. And I did not have that. really had redefined myself as a backend engineer. And so at that point, I started from the bottom and just cleared everything out and just said, I'm going to learn from all these amazing people. Um, Keith included. And I actually built a lot of skills in just being an entrepreneur and how learning how to take an idea and build it using my strengths in engineering, but really just to understand what questions should I be asking and how should I be thinking about this. And if I needed help, to find the experts who could help me in those different ways, but to really rebuild myself instead of just an engineer to be a problem solver. And so I think that for me, because of the nature of that organization, it crafted me in that way. But I do feel like now with AI, everyone, no matter what their role is going to have some degree of this level of thinking. To your point around the creativity, leadership, judgment. Once the task and knowledge are offloaded from us, we don't have to worry about those parts as much anymore. We now all have to, taking a concept from technology, shift left, move away from more of the hands-on tasks to more of the strategic tasks.
And so, what is your one-two punch underneath all that?
The one-two punch. I really think it is technology is still first and foremost, but I do think then beyond that, it really is that level of critical thinking. I love pioneering and imagining the future. And so I really pride myself in being a bit of a visionary and a bit of a futurist and thinking through what might be possible. And so even beyond what might be available today, thinking forward to quantum computing or other aspects of technology because at the end of the day, AI is still a tool. It's still a hammer. And the problems, though, are the real focus points still. You may have a much better hammer now that also can act as a screwdriver or any other tool in the toolkit, but it's still a tool. You still need to have the right problems to solve. And at the end of the day, you're still solving them for people.
And when you think about that level of thinking, your entrepreneurial mindset mixed with your technical background and combining that as a one-two punch, we still have a lot of the day-to-day tasks. I see a world where these tasks are largely automated, but right now we're in a weird transition where we know it's not going to be valuable in the future, but we still have to do most of it right now. And so, how do you actually manage the day-to-day to invest time in building the skills that you know are going to be incredibly important tomorrow? So your one-two punch is still valuable in a world that has shifted.
Yeah, so to be blunt about it, I think for myself and for a lot of others who are at the point that we are at in our careers, we have decades of experience from building things in the pre-AI world. The part that I worry about is that AI makes it easy for everyone to feel like an expert in a lot of different areas. But to your point, right now, the technology just really isn't fully trustworthy. Even specialized technologies, you still have to question what solutions it's giving you with the answers and whatnot. And so you still have to lean on the fundamentals a lot of times. For us as experts, it does accelerate us because what it produces for you, you can quickly review and challenge. But for someone who's brand new to the area that that they're exploring or asking a question in, they may not have that level of experience or instinct, and so it may give the ChatGPT or another AI solution may give them something to move forward with, and then they just go ahead blindly move forward with it. And if you've ever done this before, I'm not a plumber, I'm not an electrician. I always run these things past an expert, and they almost always catch something that, well, you could electrocute yourself there, or you could have hurt yourself, or done something. And so, I think that we're in a weird time where you do need to still lean on experts a bit. And I think for us, we're still fortunately in that time where as experts, we do have something to lean on. Now, fast forward a bit and forget, like at some point it's going to catch up. And likely that's going to be very quick. At that point, I do think that if you fast forward all the way to where AI with quantum computing, it thinks through everything, it can solve everything. I do essentially believe that it will get to a point, and people love asking me the question, like, what do you think will happen when AI becomes sentient and we have Skynet and all that? I don't think that, I mean, maybe it'll work out the same way as Terminator, hopefully not. I actually think that what will happen is we will essentially become pets for the AI. So if you think about the world of animals and other things,
We're
right,
here to uplift the audience, Dan. This isn't supposed to be a scary show. What are we talking about?
so the whole thing here is I think that people are so worried about AI replacing them. I think that the ball's already start rolling. And if it does or it doesn't, I think that there isn't a world where AI just completely eradicates us. I think that we still will have a purpose and a meaning in the world. You think about the world of animals and other things where we could, if we were, again, in the past, they tried to do this, but eradicate entire species or do other things like that. We'd have the power to do that, but why would we do it? Like, what would the actual purpose be? I actually think of AI actually developed to a point where it could replace a lot of what we do. I don't think that it would want to replace us. I think if anything, it would just leave and go to another planet or something and just leave us behind and we're back to where we were. But honestly, I think it's just more that we continue to, it actually causes us as a society to rethink what do we put, like, how do we define our own purpose? How do we give our lives a meaning? And it will hopefully ground us back to like interacting with each other, leaning more on each other, being like bring the humanity back to things. Where right now we're in this weird state where there's so much technology, people are staring at their phones, and it's just so much of what we do. I think that the technology will evolve to a point where hopefully it frees us up by taking these tasks away and then allows us to actually then go back to communicating and collaborating and socializing with each other.
Yeah, I love that focus on being grounded in human connection. Storytelling is a timeless skill from being around the fire pit back in the day to now. I think it's more important than ever of really being able to draw lines for people. And so you went through a bunch of stuff. Let me tease apart a few different lenses there. One is the long term of what happens, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What does it look like long term in the future? Then there's what's right around the corner, 12 months away, 24 months away. And then what can you do right now? And if you think about the what can you do right now lens, if you're coaching somebody to say, hey, I think the OODA loop that was developed by the Air Force in the 1950s is really effective here, where it's the old story from Top Gun, where somebody can have a bigger, better fighter jet. But if your pilots are better at self-awareness, identifying what's happening in real time really quickly, and then adjusting, they can fly circles around the competition. And I think that's really true for humans and teams and people right now, where the OODA stands for observe, orient, decide, act. And so we don't know where the world's going to be in 5 years. But right now, we can see what happened last month. We can see what happened today. We can orient ourselves, we can decide, and we can act. And the people that do that the fastest are really going to be successful. It's the old Charles Darwin quote of, it's not the most intelligent of the species that survive, nor the strongest. It's the one most adaptive to change. And so in a world of adapting to change, how do you coach people on the ground floor right now to be able to on a daily basis practice some of the skills that are going to help them with that observe, orient, decide, act, so that they can build up this skill set and just be ready for it, not needing to know what the future looks like, but knowing that they're taking action today?
Yeah, I think there are. I'll start with the two things not to do. The first thing is not to embrace AI in some way and to really fight it or not to understand the changes that are happening. And I understand there's a lot that's coming really quickly, but there are a lot of things that you can do to just try to experiment with things. We'll get into that in a minute. And then the second thing is leaning too much on AI, treating it as if like, okay, well, I'm going to have it write my emails and do all these other things and not really challenge or question it. Or even if you're doing it in a way that's effective, not replacing what you do and changing what you do fundamentally, because that's the other failure case where you're allowing AI essentially to take your job. And so what really you should be doing is, firstly, and I challenge everyone to do this no matter what their role, responsibility, job today is just to think, what of the things that you're doing today, personal, work-wise, what of those things may be replaced by AI or already are starting to be replaced by AI, and start to identify some of those. And then, same way that you would coach someone in general through leadership or through their careers, think about your own strengths. What are you strong at? What are your talents? And then thinking through with AI as if it were a tool that you could use to help you. What could you offload to AI, and what do you retain yourself? Where hopefully you're leveraging your strengths to do something with the help of AI better than you can do alone. I think essentially, and you hear about this a lot, we're in this era where we're going to see the first one or two person billion-dollar company. Don't know if it's going to be next year, 2 years, 5 years, but we're now in that era and it's going to happen. And so if that's the case, that person, they're obviously not going to be doing everything themselves, but they're going to be leveraging their talents, and they likely have redefined themselves already to really lean into this. as an easy way for people to start to make this sort of transition, especially now where we're still in the gray area. There's still a lot of time. I think that everyone, if you haven't, which I still have met people who haven't, if you haven't used ChatGPT or any of these LLM tools, definitely start to do so. With the easiest one, I would say, outside of ChatGPT even, is something like Perplexity, like something that actually replaces Google searches. So Google searches, even Google itself, has started to embed and infuse AI because they realize that they're about to be antiquated as well by not replacing the way that they're used. But in the future, we're not going to have to do these closed searches where do a search and then you have to kind of hunt down still what where the website is or the materials you're looking for. You'll be able to just engage with essentially an assistant that can tell you, hey, I want to learn more about this or look more for this. Perplexity actually is research based, so it will link back to the resources. But it's just an easy step from where we are today in Google searches to using some more AI to help you with something that's relatively mundane. There are a lot of other things depending on what area or job you're in or what else you want to do that there are already specialized AI tools that you can leverage there too. But I'd suggest doing something like that to start.
And we are talking about there's purposeful practice, getting used to things, working with tools, improving your skills. On that thread, purposeful practice is something I find fascinating right now, where you can simulate things in ways that were never possible before because of AI. And there's other technologies as well. It's not just AI. If you look at a couple examples, the e-foil was developed in surfing, where it used to be if you spent 3 hours surfing, you'd get about 5 minutes of on wave time. Maybe as little as two, because you wait, you paddle all the way out, you wait for Mother Nature to get the right wave, you hope you're the next in line, you wait in line, you hopefully catch the wave, you get about 5 seconds on the wave, and then it's all over and you do it all again. And you get about 5 minutes of practice for 3 hours. And they invented these e-foils where you can go out and it looks like a wakeboard, but you're just on your own. It's an EV surfboard and you can go and surf. And it is not the same as being on a wave, and it is simulated, but you can get 100 times the practice reps and the feedback loops for your body to develop the ankle strength and the balance and the momentum. And you still need the waves. It doesn't replace it. But if you're not getting that 100x repetition and feedback, you just can't compete anymore. It just completely changed the game. I saw this recently with Duo Max with Duolingo, where now they have an AI conversationalist where you can put yourself in a scenario and say, I want to go to Spain and be at a restaurant, and it'll put you in that situation and you talk to an AI bot, and it is good enough to simulate. It's not the same. It's not the same as immersing yourself, but in a weekend you could crunch as much as you used to be able to in a whole year of high school Spanish.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's really incredible. It wasn't possible before. There are these big, literally 100x unlocks. What kind of 100x unlocks are you seeing?
I'll give you just along the lines of what you were just saying, an example. A few weeks ago, I was on a panel and I wanted to practice. I knew kind of the idea of what would be discussed and the types of questions. And so I actually gave it the LinkedIn profiles of the people that were going to be on the panel with me, as well as the host. I gave it the list of tentative areas and questions. And I just simulated the panel. I said, okay, act as if you were the host, act as if you were all the other panelists, and let's engage in conversation in ChatGPT. I put it in voice mode, and for a good portion of a day, I just rehearsed going through this panel over and over, and each time it was different. And so I had to think on my feet, but it was by the time I got to the actual panel, I was so prepared. I had no nerves. I just went on there. Every question that came out, I kind of anticipated or had an idea of what I wanted to talk about. It was fantastic. And I've done role playing before. I've talked, to other people prior when I'm going to a panel just to practice. This was by far the most efficient preparation I've ever had. But so a lot of the other 100x unlocks I've seen, it depends on, again, the area. For, let's say, just even for technology itself, we're getting to a point where even the GitHub Copilots, if you haven't heard about this, this is a tool in GitHub, which is a code repository where you can actually submit your code base. They developed an AI powered tool that lets you actually write code. But the thing is, it's trained on open source code that's publicly available. And so it is, to be blunt about it, mediocre. It's basically middling. It takes the average of all the code that's out there, but it gives you a pretty good starting point.
So you're telling people Skynet is not here yet.
It's not yet here, but soon, soon. But so the thing that's beyond that is now there's another startup that Collectors works with called Augment. They actually developed a tool that allows you to basically learns the context of the code you're working in, and so it can answer specific questions about tell me more about what this function's doing, and it will actually scan the rest of your code and tell you what it's doing. You can also then ask it to help you write things and complete codes or make certain types of changes, and it will do so again in the context of your actual code. And so you combine this with the next level of AI tools are out there, agentic technology using AI agents. And just as a quick background here, there are two types of AI systems that are available today. One is more workflow related, inputs and outputs. So that's more like ChatGPT. You give it a prompt, it gives you an answer. You then have agents, AI agents, which you give access to data and to APIs, tools. And then when you give it a prompt, a task, it will essentially use a combination of the data and tools however it sees fit to solve the problem. So it better mimics what a human would do or an expert would do. And that's the next evolution of AI. So you combine that with the code writing, which a lot of different people have already done. Devin is a tool that is agent based, but even Augment and a lot of these other tools, they're all agentic now. It basically simulates entry level engineers. And so these are the things where now I actually mentor a lot of college students and a lot of people who are new to industry. I do worry about their jobs because from day one, what they came out learning and were prepared to do in the workforce, it's evolved. Now I'm trying to coach them to say, look, you have to understand that you now work alongside these AI agents. Your job is now not to write the code; it's to learn how to use the AIs and guide them. And so essentially, you have to start out as an MBA in engineering without the MBA. And so training them on how to like coach and mentor and use these AI tools. And but I think but we will see 100x in terms of throughput and a lot of the technological jobs, the software jobs, they're going to evolve very quickly.
And tying that back to a previous thing that you mentioned, I love the example of you preparing for the panel. And you're able to do this at a rapid way that never would have been possible before. They even have tools where you can practice public speaking and you can give your speech and it will look at your tone and your intonation and your timing and look at your topics and decide how compelling it might be to an audience. It is simulated. It is not the same. But it used to be that you required people's permission to do a lot of things. It took somebody's permission to be able to get on stage and do a presentation. And you only got so many opportunities to do that. I think back to something as simple as setting objectives and key results as a product manager. And those Flatiron days, I remember the first time I did it, I pre-wrote too much of it. And I came to people and they're like, what? You didn't even have the respect to ask us what we thought before you wrote down these objectives and key results. And then a quarter later, 3 months later, I came and said, okay, blank slate, let's start from scratch. And people were like, what? We're in trouble. Our product manager doesn't even know where we're going. It's like, all right, finally, another 3 months, the Goldilocks of, hey, I've got the objectives, but not the key results. We have our strategic direction down. We know where we're going, but there's a lot of details we'll fill in together. Let's go. And then that resonated, but it took me 9 months to get there. And nowadays, I think you could simulate that. Say, play a skeptical group of, engineers and data scientists and really smart people that are mission oriented that are in a room, and I'm going to present this. What kind of challenges could I face? And in a weekend, I think it wouldn't be the same, and it wouldn't have gotten me there. But maybe I get there in a week instead of 9 months. And I think for people that have spent decades building up their skill set because you got dripped these opportunities, we have to change our mindset. The folks that are learning today, that drip is not the same. You can turn it into a fire hose if you want to.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful. I think the line that you have to be careful about there is making sure that you use AI as a way to advise and mentor you, but not as a decision-making tool yet for most things. I do think that we're now at a point where I think I was reading this morning something like 14% within the next couple of years of decisions will be automated by AI. Right now it's zero, but we're getting there and it's getting better. But right now we are not yet there. And so do not trust AI to make decisions. It'll drain your money. I think. You could use to advise you and get input, but yeah, I think that's to your point. I think that especially for people who are aspiring to be leaders, and at this point, given the where AI is, we all should aspire to be close to the leadership or some aspect of leadership. I think that it can help to prepare you for that, even if you have no connections or anything else. It's again a great equalizer in that way.
And you mentioned trust there and whether or not you trust the AI. That's a great segue to our next topic, which is about trust within teams. And as part of that, a big part of trust is listening and understanding what your team, what your audience, what they care about, not what you care about. And so to put our money where our mouth is, we'll do a poll right now, and we're going to put for anybody who's live a QR code on screen, and you can respond to the poll. And we're going to ask a very simple question of which aspect of AI implementation concerns you the most as an individual. And you have a few options to choose from, and we'd love to see the results because we'll use that to really thread through what we talked to in the second half of this conversation, because it really is all about listening to people and not what you care about, but what they care about. And that's a different orientation as a leader. As people respond to that, so we can get some results and see what the audience cares about. Dan, I think this is a good opportunity just to talk a little bit about the program that we have coming up in September. We have an executive product leadership program where, by listening to people, we found that people are really focused on how do we build human connection and how do we leverage AI to build better products, build better companies, and improve ourselves and future-proof ourselves and our teams. And so we have a select group of hand-picked people. Dan will be there. I will be there. We've got leaders in industry, some of the most creative people, also some of the cutting edge AI researchers coming together for 2 days. It's not a conference where you meet 1,000 people for 2 minutes. This is about a small group going deep, focusing on human connection, on leadership, on creativity, on judgment, on practicing these skills and these implementations, and sharing notes with people from all around the world that are at the top in their field. And so this conversation is just a lead up to that. So Dan, we're starting to get some results in here. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think definitely one of the top themes that's coming up are the top two are data privacy and security and the learning curve. And data privacy security is an interesting one because it's something like 20 to 23%. There's been a 20 to 23% increase in AI related legislation worldwide since 2023, the past 2 years. And so in Europe, I think was one of the first to actually develop just a wholesale AI privacy LLM set of rules and regulations in the world. It makes sense given that they were also leading with GPDR and a lot of data privacy in general. But you're starting to see in states like California and a lot of other states, just them coming up with specific ways to help protect their people for data, user privacy, healthcare data, deep fakes, things along these lines. It's a very scary thing. And then on top of that, you now have a lot of security risks. What back in the early days of ChatGPT, there were some Amazon engineers who used it to help them code, but they didn't, change the little checkbox to not have that data, those inputs be trained, part of the training set for ChatGPT. And so for a period of time, you could actually see some of AWS's code in ChatGPT. And so data privacy security is a really big thing. As we ask people and encourage people to use a lot of these AI tools, we also need to help them to be mindful around the security aspects and how to protect themselves from it. So at Collectors, one of the things that we did early on was actually build some policies around this. We actually also use automation to detect when people may be inputting things into ChatGPT, especially company information, and we intercept it. We actually black out the page from being able to do so. But we, again, we've been thoughtful about it. A lot of people have not. And this is part of that change transformation. We're going to require people to be educated about it. And to be honest, those people who are building the tools, they do have a large amount of responsibility. And I know they're working with lawmakers and others to help regulate that. So in LinkedIn and other social media networks, for example, you will see now watermarks. ChatGPT does add a watermark when you use Sora, the video development platform that they have, or generate an image with Dolly. They actually have watermarks that a lot of times are undetectable, but then these other social media platforms can detect it and they label that it was an AI created piece of content. And so that's nice. But I think in the meantime, we can't trust that these things are there. Definitely, we need people to be a little more mindful about it.
And data privacy and security was the top one, and then learning curve and job security were right behind it as the big ones. And we'll touch on each of these. A big part of what you were just talking about is trust. I don't know if you saw, I thought it was mind-blowing recent Anthropic article that came out where they're working on their bleeding edge model that's not released yet. And they saw that if they went to turn it off, it would try really nicely to keep itself from being turned off. And they gave it information about an engineer on the team, hypothetical fake information, but just to test it, having an affair. And then they went to turn it off and it tried all the nice routes. And then at the end, it was willing to throw that person under the bus and blackmail them and say, I'm going to release it to everybody that you had this affair if you turn me off. So leave me on. Like that changed my mindset a lot about what I put into these things. And that just came out. I mean, these things are changing all the time. So I do think we have to be very careful about it. But one thing that's interesting there is this is Anthropic's approach as well to build trust is to say, hey, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let's just tell you exactly what's happening. Let's go deep. Let's not pretend there's no risks in these things. Let's tell you what the risks are. Let's share it. And we're going to share our approach for how we're trying to combat it because the cat's out of the bag. You're not going to prevent this stuff from happening, but we can be open about what's going on. We can talk about how we're going to try to protect it and we're going to try to arm you so that you can be thoughtful about it. And I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if you've seen other things on this front that viewers should be aware of, but there's been some really crazy stuff that's come out recently.
Yeah, I think AI, the thing that we have to keep in mind is that it's not this type of magic. It's trained on human content and humans. And so it's going to be a reflection of us as a society, which if you look back in history, there are a lot of things that we are ashamed of and that have happened. And just like humans in general, it's both beautiful, but also it can be very ugly and it can be very it's just it's something that we need to keep in mind that it's not going to necessarily reflect the best of us. It's just going to reflect us. And so we just need to, again, treat it accordingly and not act as if it's the best decision maker or a silver bullet for things. But I do feel like as we learn to incorporate it into our lives, like we will find what that line is and how much trust to have with it. Right now, we should be skeptical of it and a little bit untrustworthy of it. But that's healthy, and I think that again, it's part of the journey in figuring out how do we incorporate in our lives to make things better, to make society better, but not to again to treat it as if it's going to be our savior.
And there's a few questions that have come in as well that I'd love us to get a chance to respond to. And before picking apart a few of those, a lot of what we're talking about here is trust. And so I'd love to transition this to the next part of the conversation, which is on trust. And I think that we're at a seminal moment where trust has always been important, but it's now that much more emphasized. And there's a very specific reason, which is trust unlocks the truth. If you have trust on the team and you have collaboration, people are willing to share information, then you have all the information. With all the information, you can make good decisions. Without all the informations, your decisions will perpetually suck because you aren't informed. And only with trust, you get all of the information. And the people making the fastest iteration loop, I think, clearly win in this environment. So while it's epically hard because you're up against fear and discomfort, and people on this call said, hey, job security bothers us. And so if people are worried about job security, then it's really hard to get underneath the covers and really allay the fear such that you can have trust, such that you can make good decisions, such that you can actually make sure they still have jobs in the future. And so it's a self-fulfilling culture thing. And so I'd love to hear from you. What are you seeing the most successful leaders do right now that builds trust, even in the face of rapid change and uncertainty?
The the thing that was always a problem actually in general in a lot of the organizations I've been in were the people who used information hiding or just like the fact that they had information that they weren't sharing with others as power. This almost completely goes away with AI. And so you have tools like Glean, even though it's role-based access control, you only have access to what you would have access to. You suddenly have access to all the information that everyone else in a similar role would have access to. A lot of managers, they can't really hoard the information as easily anymore. And so the ones who are leaning on that to control people or to be in their positions of authority or to be irreplaceable, that now goes away. And so now it's an even bigger forcing function for people to go to where they should have been focusing all along, which is looking at your strengths and looking at how can you provide value in an organization. And a lot of times it's by uplifting people. And so, for example, at Collectors, one of the things that we do is we actually for over a year now, we've had a lot of concentration on helping everyone, not just people in product and tech, but the entire organization to learn how to use AI tools. Because this is one of the things that everyone's going to have to learn how to do. It's just like using a computer, learning how to type, learning how to write emails. Everyone's going to have to learn how to use AI tools, and we want our people to be part of the journey with us, not for us to move away from them with these tools. And so we're hoping that by empowering them on how to use these tools, we will help them to actually be more comfortable with it. But then beyond that, we want them to help us to pioneer how to use these tools. So this year, we started the second part of that journey, which is by building an innovators incentive program. And actually to allow people, no matter what role they're in, to provide ideas of what we should invest in or to propose novel ways, like problems for us to solve. Even if the AI tool may or may not exist, just to start highlighting this may be an area where if there were a piece of technology or AI tool that could help, it would help us greatly because now they're in control of how that shift happens, where it starts, and how it evolves. And they know their roles better than we do as well. But as a result of this, I think that there's less mistrust of how we're using AI. We're not using it to displace people or remove them from their roles. We're actually using it to help them to be better, faster, more organized, more efficient, and to focus on the more strategic things or the things that AI can't yet replace. And as long as they continue to think in this way, they have now developed the skill that will make it so that they are very unlikely to be replaced by AI. And so in collectors, we're trying to make that happen. Again, like there's still people who are change resistant or who aren't going to come along for that ride. That's fine too. There's still organizations where they'll be happy and where they can continue doing other things. But we're
We
hoping
hope.
that,
We
well,
hope.
yeah, yeah, we hope. I mean, yeah, we'll see. It'll always be like it's kind of like going back to well, it's a little different, but almost like people who appreciate old technology, phonographs, cassettes, things like that. Just be a niche market for them. No, but I do feel like people will and have been really creative and really embracing this change, which has helped the organization for sure, but more importantly, the individuals. It's what's made it so that they do have more trust in us as leaders and where we're heading.
I want to take a couple questions. Is speaking of all that have come in from the audience. So Jorge has a very interesting question. Do we really need technology to communicate and have social skills? And I think this is fascinating, where I think if we're not careful by accident, the technology could make us less human. But if we're very thoughtful and intentful, we could actually use the technology to get the non-human stuff out of the way and focus on being more human. And I'll give you an example with my coaching where it's not even just AI, but I invested in having a teleprompter so that I can look and make direct eye contact with my coaching clients. And then I'll turn all my other devices off and I'll have AI take notes during the meeting. I'll also have AI do prep for every meeting and look through the last year's worth of transcripts and identify what the patterns were in those conversations and where I can do better as a coach and how this person has progressed towards their goals and what kind of prompts might be helpful. So very quickly I can prepare and then I can sit down and just be in the moment and truly listen and be more human and be more focused on, okay, what's going on in your company, what's going on with you, and how do I present different perspectives that might help you connect dots so you can be more successful in your job. And that's the essence of making that human connection and maybe the storytelling to pull it all together. And I'm using AI to get the other stuff out of the way so I can focus on being human versus doing everything else at once. And then I'm less in the moment. And so that's an example from my side. I'd love to hear how you would react to that. Do we really need technology to make us, better humans at the end of the day and communication and social skills?
No, what we need to be better humans are more interactions with humans. So I've seen the same thing, and I run a side boutique consultancy, Myth MVP. We help organizations to navigate this changing landscape, building new technology and helping founders to learn what to build, how to build it. Also helping companies to learn how to scale and embrace AI. But even with that business alone, it's mostly me, a couple of other people. And I'm using heavy use of AI for multiple things, writing product requirement documents, writing SOWs, communicating back and forth with organizations, helping to navigate new technologies I may not have used before, but have an idea of at a high level the principles, the best practices that they may be missing. And to your point, along that same vein, the reason why I use all these tools isn't to just offload it and to not interact with the people as much. I use this so that I can make it take a task that would take me hours, do it within minutes, and then spend the rest of my time actually either helping more people out and meeting with more people, or talking to the team and going over what was built, and what the AI helped to guide me in terms of a some choices and navigate, and just then doing the human aspect of let me talk to you about some of these options and teach you about how to think about it. And so I think that, again, going back to something I said earlier, I think that AI is great as long as we use it as a way to free ourselves up to spend more time with each other. I really do think that that is the way that things should go. Like right now, we still sit in front of our computers, programming and like sending emails, and even the time in meetings. A lot of times it's note taking or AI, like action items and things like that. Um, I think that once AI, and it's already almost there, once AI replaces a lot of these tasks, we should just be spending more time talking and imagining and thinking about what should we be doing next, what challenges should we be solving, getting to know each other and go out and do things. Let the AI code. We'll go out to dinner. Like, these are the sorts of things where I think that hopefully this is the change we'll see as AI starts to take over more of these tasks for us.
Yeah, that's moving to higher ground. And you've seen that in a bunch of different fields. I was listening to a fascinating podcast about the history of CFOs. And 100 years ago, your whole job in the accounting department was literally just to write down the numbers because there were no PCs. And if you got the numbers right, you won. That was the whole thing, to sum up all the numbers and do the arithmetic at scale. It was incredibly hard. And then technology and PCs came along, and that got a lot easier. And then spreadsheets came along, and now you can run scenarios. Now you have financial planning and analysis teams to say, well, what if we invested in this? And what if we leased this equipment? Or what if we bought this equipment? What if we bought this company? What if we raised money? And you can run all these scenarios. And that took a lot of time and energy and was hard. And then now with AI, you can actually automate a lot of those scenarios. And so you're just moving to higher and higher ground, spending much more time thinking strategically, or maybe combining a COO type role with a CFO type role. And so I think all environments are moving to higher ground. And my background in product management, a lot of that's going to be about customer discovery, really understanding what people need and how to make them successful, rapidly giving them product to engage with, and a lot less of the internal wrangling that was built on all assumptions that may start falling apart. We don't need anymore. And so I think if you approach it in the right way with the right mindset, it's actually super liberating and exciting.
I agree. I think what the last example I'll use there is we have there are teams in technology called platform teams. These teams are internal. They are mostly just focusing on building the technology, talking to some of the engineers, but just really just focused on the tasks. And there are tools now, like there's one called Tessel, Tessell. They're a great startup. They've built a lot of automation around automating a lot of the rebuilding. One of the things that these teams often have to do is like, oh, the software's getting bigger, there are more consumers, we have to resize it, we have to shift things, scale things. The tools take care of that for you. So now, as a result, our platform team is actually going around talking to more of the engineers and understanding the business problems. And it's along the point of something you and I, Keith, have talked about before, but a lot of the engineers, they're no longer just engineering. They have to learn product skills. They have to understand the business more because that's where they're now shifting to that higher ground. They now have to understand the problems that they're solving at a more fundamental level, which is great because now instead of just focusing on building technology, they can focus on how can we build the technology more efficiently, or understanding the problem so acutely where they can propose different technology to build instead of what was originally proposed that would better solve that problem. And so I do feel like this is it's a great move in terms of where AI is helping to shift a lot of these organizations.
Another question coming in, I think is fascinating. How can you have trust if you cannot determine what data is real or fake? This is coming from Joe. And this is one of those ones I do not think there's a silver bullet, but I have a framework for trust in general I think can be really helpful for people, which is trust psychologically has been broken down into four distinct components. When you decide if you trust somebody, let's start one step earlier of determining if the data is fake or not. But let's say, Dan and I were deciding if we trust each other. The first component is integrity. What are your values and what are your principles as a human? The second component is intention. In this environment, in this moment, what are you optimizing for? What are your goals? And are they aligned with other people's? And then there's competence. Do you show rigor and actually good at what you do? And then the final one is consistency. Do you do what you say you're going to do? And the data one is crazy. And would love to get your thought on that. I'll start with the human one first, which is in an environment where we don't know what we can trust. and what we can't trust. Let's just use that as a premise for a second. Thinking about how people perceive your behaviors, your product launches, everything along those four lines can actually really help you identify behaviors that erode trust and behaviors that build trust because we do not have certainty. That is a fallacy and we don't have it. And we can't give it to people. And people crave certainty, but we can't give it. But we can give them as clarity. Clarity on this is what I stand for. This is what I'm optimizing for. Here's the goal. I have competence. I'm using my rigor to say, here's how I've assessed the situation. Here's the context. And here's the knowns and here's the unknowns. And guess what? There are unknowns. And this is a calculated bet. And it may work and it may not. But this is why we're doing it. This is what we believe in. And you're not always going to have bets that pay off. But you should never have a bet where you can't clearly define why you're making it and what you're betting on. And then the final one with consistency is it's almost impossible to have consistency with results all the time, but you can have consistency with this is what I'm going to do next and this is why, and then I do it. And so you have consistency with your actions and let's call it mini promises. And then long term, you hope that builds up and drives actual outcomes. And so I think when people think about it that way, it can really help them orient how they deal with information. And I do think there's a lot of ways AI can help with that because it could do a lot of the extra work that we used to not get to. On a Wednesday night, you need to make a decision. You just make a decision, you post it on Slack and you're done, as opposed to doing the extra work of collecting everybody's input and writing a document and sharing it out and sharing the context other people don't have so they understand why you made that decision. They don't just connect dots in their head with some scary scenario that isn't true. And the AI can do a lot of that work to help be more transparent. I think that helps a lot. And so that's a human view. On the data side, this is your world and expertise. How do you even think about approaching that, let alone solving that?
Yeah, for a lot of it, don't trust it. Like, don't trust it. You do not trust what the AI is telling you, right? But in general, so just as an anecdote, we are testing a few systems at Collectors to help us to navigate our financial data. There is so much of the finance team's time that's spent building up forecasting or the quarterly earnings reports and things along these lines. And a lot of those should theoretically be able to be automated. However, because it requires 100% certainty and consistency with the data, it needs to be exact. And we are seeing that it's right 80% of the time. 80% of the time. That's pretty high. At the same time, I'm not going to put a company's success in their financial reporting on 80% of the time being accurate. And so one of the things that we just learned is that now's not the right time for that sort of use case. Question everything. But the thing is, like Keith hit the nail on the head. A lot of what you should be using AI tools for, and just in general, regardless if it's AI or something else, use all this data to help you determine the direction that you're moving, what to say no to and why, to really think through the strategy. But at the end of the day, the data is like, don't trust exact numbers, just trust the direction of where those numbers are going or the sorts of things. Today, like when you see a survey or an article talking about like, 3/4 of people do XYZ, you dig into the data. Like how many of us actually dig into the data firstly? But then when you actually dig into it, you realize, oh, it's a sample size of like 50 people or something, and it's like the wrong demographic. So, like even that level of data, we should have always questioned to begin with and should continue to question. However, it doesn't mean that your instincts around direction or decision making, like that these data points aren't helpful toward it. Just don't rely on the actual data.
Now, taking that, we talked about individual skills. We talked about how to prepare for the future. We talked about some components. We talked about trust. Now, let's get to the final part of what we wanted to talk about today, which is probably the hardest, which is mindset. And I have an analogy for this, which is it used to be that in your career, you started out looking like a growth stock, where everything was about learn in your 20s, earn in your 30s. It's not about the decades per se, but you learn and you iterate and you're a growth stock, and then you get more and more valuable based on your personal growth. And then later on in your career, you look more like fixed income, where you get dividends and interest and you can reap the rewards of your past success because you've built knowledge, you've built industry expertise, you built relationships, etc. And you can grow if you want to, but you don't have to. And I think we're in a world now where we have to at least play out the scenario of what if those dividends and interest went away and we're only as good as our next move? And we were growth stocks and then we became fixed income and we're back to growth stocks where we don't have a choice. We can't reap the rewards of our old knowledge because it's no longer relevant relevant. And that's very hard to get your mind around. But if you can, I think it's a huge unlock. And it's not always going to be true, but I think there'll be pockets of it where it's probably more true than not. And if we have that mindset of, okay, we're beginners again, let's go, that's exciting, as opposed to where are my dividends? Maybe they're not coming. So let's focus on the other stuff. And with that as a premise, I'd love to hear from you. You know, everything is learnable, but not everything is teachable. And so sometimes you have to facilitate an environment where people and teams could just discover things for themselves. And what are you seeing leaders can do to facilitate an environment in today's world so you can develop these skills really rapidly and discover what you need for the future?
We actually went through similar to what you were saying around OKRs. I think that a lot of companies go through similar journeys in OKRs that are applicable here, where the outcome is what you should be focusing on, and the way you get there needs to be adaptable. And so, tying back to what you were saying earlier about adaptability, the tools we use to get there, the ways that, like we approached it, the different strategies, it's going to shift. Things always shift. And as long as we're open to that, but we are consistent and thorough about the outcomes we're striving for, then it opens you up to just figuring out, okay, what's the best way to get there today? And I think that that is the mentality that most people, especially the leaders of teams, once they have that with their teams, it's extremely important and powerful. For example, with me, with my leaders, a lot of times I strive very hard because I am old school in a lot of ways. I'm a C++ developer. I'm back end, as I mentioned. I have a certain way of viewing things and thinking about things to that was good at one point. But I acknowledge like not it's not good for every situation. It may not be good now. And so what I instead focus on are the outcomes. Here is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make this more stable, more efficient. Here's my way of thinking about it, but you understand my outcome. What are some ways that we could get there? And then trusting that they are going to come up with a lot of different options, and then they'll present it, and then we'll talk about it, and then I'll sign off on it. But I have to keep an open mindset in that the way that I thought about doing things may not be the best way. But as long as I give them a clear and crisp outcome, most of the time they will come up with something different than what I would have, but better. And I think the same thing for ourselves. I think if we keep those outcomes consistent, we have to just, in terms of the growth, fixed income, like as long as we have a certain, like, I need to earn this much or I want to have these things, there are a million ways to get anywhere. And so with the adaptability, you'll be able to find the best solution in this point in time, given today's technology, tools, etc.
Two final questions for you. One that's hopefully easy and one that's very hard. The easy one first. What's your favorite collectible behind you?
Favorite collectible? Oh, I'm a big Alex Morgan collector. She's retired, but she's still in the game. She now owns part of the team that she retired on. It's one of these Alex Morgan cards. Don't make me choose.
Awesome. Love it. And then this is a question I've been asking a lot of my coaching clients. What is a belief that has served you well in your career, but may hold you back going forward?
Ooh, hmm. I really think that, and I don't know if it's going to hold me back, to be honest. It's just going to shift a little bit. I do believe that everyone has a strength, that everyone has something to offer the world. I think in a way, like it may evolve very weirdly as we're exposed to more things. There's a lot of us fell into a certain path in terms of our careers or our learning or knowledge. We may have strengths that we didn't know. So you may be an amazing golfer and you never even picked up a club before, and you may not, right? Like in a lifetime. But I think that with AI and a lot of these other tools, it's going to allow us to experiment and test out a lot of these things, more so at least than in the past. I don't know if it's going to hold me back, to be honest. I think maybe the biggest thing that will hold me back on is that it gives me so many options. I waste all my time exploring all of them, or that we all explore all of them. But yeah, that's a good question. Tough one.
But I can't think of a better way to wrap this conversation than that, thinking about everybody has something amazing to offer. And this isn't a time to emulate other people. It's a time to think independently. And we talked about building individual skills, articulate what your 1-2 punch is, and then practice those, especially practice that doesn't require other people's permission, which is way more possible than ever before. So you can get amazing at that. And it's a time to experiment, bring down the stakes, try things that are low stakes, just have fun with it, learn it. A big section about building trust and how do you build trust with yourself. Nobody's going to trust you until you trust yourself. Trust yourself, trust your team, and that's going to unlock the truth, which allows you to iterate. And then the final part of just let's change mindset of it's not what we've learned in the past that we can use today. It's what we're going to learn today and do today that's going to make us successful today. And then guess what? Tomorrow we'll wake up and we'll observe, we'll orient, we'll decide, we'll act based on all the new information because we're probably going to read some press releases tonight that even change some of this conversation. And if we have the right mindset, that can be exciting and that can be fun. And it doesn't have to be scary. I think I'm an optimist about the future as long as we approach it in the right way. Dan, has been a fantastic conversation. Where can people find you?
Yeah, people can find me on the collector's website, at dvt at collectors.com, or for my side hustle, Myth MVP, dvt at mythmvp.com, or Dan at danvantran.com.
Awesome. And you can join Dan and I at the Executive Product Leadership Program put on at Cornell Tech in New York City, September 18th and 19th, along with a host of other cutting edge AI researchers and leaders in industry. It's going to be an amazing environment. Look forward to seeing people there. And if you had questions that we weren't able to get to, I know there were some that we weren't able to answer, you can email Dan or you can email me. You can find me at casey.coach. It's been an awesome time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Keith, and thanks to the awesome team at Cornell Keynotes.